but I want to welcome everyone to the 2020 Greater Kansas City Peace Building Conference. This is our 8th session and the final one. And the theme of the conference is building peace through social justice. So we have heard from incredible speakers in the 3 months that this peace building conference has taken place. The conference is co-sponsored by Johnson County Community College and the Center for Global Peace Journalism at Park University. I'm Louis Duguid. I've been a journalist with the Kansas City Star for almost 40 years. I now am an author, lecturer, freelance writer, and tonight I'm your moderator. Mayor Lucas is going to give us 30 minutes of his time, and we don't want to take that up introducing him, but we want to at least let people know a little bit about our mayor. He's our anchor speaker tonight. Before Mayor Lucas was elected to the office he currently holds, he had served on the city council. In addition to being mayor, he serves on the faculty of the University of Kansas Law School. Mayor Lucas was sworn in August 1st, 2019 as the 55th mayor of Kansas City. With everything that's transpired since then, 2019 seems like a lifetime ago. Mayor Lucas has prioritized making Kansas City's neighborhoods safer. But in 2020, he has had to additionally contend with the novel coronavirus, a global pandemic, and keeping the 500,000 residents of Kansas City safe. Mayor Lucas also has had his hands full with protest marches and unrest in Kansas City, which flared after the May 25 police killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis. Mayor Lucas had to endure racist hatred and threats as a result of his getting involved. In addition, area civil rights organizations have called for Kansas City Police Chief Rick Smith to be fired. And if all of that weren't enough, Mayor Lucas continues to grapple with a city budget shortfall because of business shutdowns to keep people safe from COVID-19. More to today's presentation from the mayor, he has sadly had to confront a record number of homicides in Kansas City, which at more than 165 have eclipsed the previous record of 155 killings set in 2017. You'll find more about the mayor and his educational background at the Greater Kansas City Peace Building Conference website, which we'll put in the chat box. Mayor Lucas is going to give us a quick overview. Not sure if there will be time for questions, but if he's amenable, by golly, we'll do it. His talk tonight is on gun violence. Mayor Lucas.
It is an exciting treat to be with all of you, and I thank you for making the time. What a year it has been. We started the year in Kansas City, of course, recognizing that we had some long-standing challenges ranging from violent crime to inequality in our city. And in many ways, we thought of things that could help us address them. Zero fare transit, investment in tenants' rights in Kansas City, making sure that we're finding more ways of living in every business that works with Kansas City. But we've certainly seen through COVID-19 something interesting. And what that interesting thing was an amplification of all the problems, all the inequities, all the challenges that we had before, just put on a larger scale. Every day I spend time walking around our city. Today I walked from City Hall back to my own apartment building at 18th and Vine. On the walk, I saw those who were struggling with homelessness. I got to talk to other people who were just happy to see me, new businesses, etc. But the thing that was most interesting to me was, how does everything that we do relate to some of our core concerns? How is it that the fact that we're not actually investing in things like mental health services for our city long-term, the fact that we underinvest in economic activity and development throughout East Kansas City, Southeast Kansas City, and beyond, how is it that so many of those things continue year after year to get us to say, after we break a homicide record, oh my, how did this happen? What can we do? Is more enforcement the answer? The sad thing is, I think all of us know that that's not the answer. All of us know that things like investment in conflict resolution, investment in healthcare, investment in the people in our community makes a fundamental difference in where we can go into the future. I appreciate the opportunity today to spend just a little bit of time talking to you about some of the work that we've done along the way as I've been mayor. But also, I wanted to really spend the meat of my remarks and save some time for questions. The meat of my remarks to discuss what is it that we are trying to do and how many approaches are closed every time we try to actually address gun violence. So I started on the mayor. It was probably about the first month that I was mayor. I went to visit and they said, what can you do to try to make sure that there are firearms that are not in the hands of domestic abusers? I quickly said, well, isn't there already federal law that makes that prohibition? And they said, well, there is. The U.S. Attorney's Office very rarely brings any type of legal action against somebody for a misdemeanor in gun possession. You then ask our state prosecutors and the police, and they said, well, we usually don't bring any state charges because they won't be pursued long-term either. That left us then to an ordinance violation, something as simple as saying, well, we're going to take at least whatever steps we can to make sure that there is a domestic abuser who's terrorizing their survivors of domestic violence, the victims of domestic violence, their spouses, sometimes their families or their significant others. Then we'll make sure that they don't get to continue to carry any longer. And to the extent they are carrying, there'll be penalties for that. We introduced it, and the funniest thing happened. All these people said, this makes sense. Instead of actually all of the big culture war fights, all of the issues we deal with, people, including the newly elected governor of Missouri, said, well, yes, it seems like domestic offenders shouldn't be able to walk around with guns. So the funny thing is, I said, well, this is a great idea. I call the mayor of St. Louis. She says, wonderful idea. I call the mayor of Springfield, a Republican, wonderful idea. We meet with the governor again. They say, wonderful idea, but then a funny thing happens on the way to Jefferson City. Interest groups, others, so many say, this is something you cannot do. Why? Well, is there anybody who's actually trying to defend the rights of domestic violence offenders to be able to continue to carry firearms? No. But instead, everything gets caught in this overload of culture wars that we deal with each and every day in American life. We have an epidemic in Kansas City, and we've had an epidemic for decades before any of us heard a thing about COVID-19, and that has been gun violence. And often those solutions are at our fingertips. The solutions that recognize that quick and ready access to any type of firearm is a threat to the safety and security of everyone in Kansas City. It leads to an understanding that many folks know that having access to a firearm often leads to higher incidence of suicide, domestic violence, and any number of challenges. But more to the point, it's not so much that those of us who are mayors of St. Louis or Kansas City or anywhere are trying to say we're taking away someone's guns or someone's rights. We're saying let's use the common sense that we had in Missouri in 2012 and 1995, back when you needed a concealed carry permit, back when you didn't actually have an era of mass shootings that were shutting down schools, that were doing so many things to challenge our community more broadly. And we need people to get back to that common sense that says that for once, we're going to care much about the genocide that we're seeing on the streets in our city, in our Black community in particular, as much as we're going to care about any number of other concerns that we hear about every day on the nightly news. These are the challenges that a mayor of a city faces. This is the tightrope walk that we do each day. You know, when I was running for mayor, people noted a few things. They always said, Lucas, fix the roads, fix the potholes, and don't get me wrong, I recognize that they would mention because it was the most equitable issue. Everybody drives over a bad road. And so they said that was a big issue. And I would say, yes, we'll come up with solutions, we'll come up with ideas, we'll come up with answers to address the problem. But what I always wanted to ask them was, what can we all do that we have in violent crime? Make sure that we're mentoring more people. What can make sure that an outstanding program like the conflict resolution program currently being seen at Southeast High School and the Kansas City Public Schools District is not just a program in one school, but it's something that expands to Central, to Northeast, to East, to Paseo, Lincoln, but it's also a program that expands to districts throughout our region. We can't live in a world where we just shake our heads and act like there are no solutions to our problems. We're too great a country, and indeed, we're having problems with all types of issues now. But I continue to believe that we're a community that can come to solutions on those sorts of problems. So what are some of those solutions that I speak of? Some do relate to pure better legislation that protects people from a higher likelihood of violence and harm that they receive from firearms. There's also all of the prevention steps that we have in violent crime are things that we're following. You may have caught a few weeks ago, I announced a program that we're calling the Reform Project. The work in progress type name was created for a reason, because we're not trying to say a top down approach has come either from Quentin Lucas or Gene Peters Baker or the US Attorney Tim Garrison or Rick Smith. Instead, what we're trying to say is that actually we're coming up with a program that speaks to the ground up, that we're listening to community meetings and organizations, that we're actually saying, how is it that we can put something stable and consistent together? There are 4 pillars of that program: prevention, intervention, clearance, and reform. On the prevention side, what we talk about is actually how do we work with our health department and finding ways to address root causes of crime. The health department for years, in its social determinants of health programs, but also in its programs to reduce violence, has often said all of the work that we're doing, both in environmental planning, the neighborhoods we live in, and support for our families, and support for after school activities and workplace opportunities, we're making as big of an impact as we can from any enforcement ideas. And in fact, it's larger than usually what we see from hiring 10 or 20 more officers. So we're making sure that our next city budget actually looks to prevention as a key part and a key principle in our violent crime plan. The second part is intervention. For those of you who knew anything really about the No Violence Alliance program, much of where it succeeded related to intervention as an idea, and much of where it failed also related to intervention type concerns. On the intervention side, it's saying that if there's somebody who's fighting their way into trouble, we have alternatives for them, jobs, other social services, that we will, for lack of a better term, give you so much attention, love on you so much, that will make sure that there's a path that you know that you can go down where you'll be safer, where you can avoid a life of crime, and where you know that local government is there to stand with you. But where did the concerns happen before? The concern happened before because there became this issue of buy-in. Everybody wants their own program. We got a new police chief, we've got new changes, and then all of a sudden people said, well, is this really working? Are we getting all that we want for our dollars? But instead of trying to perfect the program, what we largely said was we looked away. And if you wonder how we get to controversial points from this summer, like Operation Legend, or the previous operation, Relentless Pursuit, all of them have names that don't say, Operation, I want to be your friend, and I want to see you find a better way. Instead, too often, they all often say, we're going to enforce, we're going to bring a hammer, and that's the only approach that we have for issues in Kansas City. No more can we stand for that. We need to make sure that we're standing for solutions that actually look to how we build people long term. It's been said often that it's easier to build people. It's easier to make sure they have opportunities than it is to rebuild a broken person. We're making sure that anybody who finds their way into trouble, anybody who finds their way into need, knows that Kansas City will be there for them, Kansas City will stand for them, and that's something that I've been proud of every step of the way. On our third prong, we speak to intervention department, we speak to clearance. Clearance used to be titled enforcement. How many arrests do we have? How many stops do we make? How many people do we catch? But I think we're all recognizing now that that can't be enough. That alone can't be the solution for our problems. What we need to actually make sure we're fine. How is it that we're actually addressing the retaliatory violence that we see on the streets of Kansas City each and every day? How are we actually making sure that instead of saying that, well, this situation was resolved because both the victim and the assailant may end up dead, we actually look to say who's touched? How many dozens or hundreds of people were part of this group? How many families are touched? How many people would be looking for their own type of vigilante justice? And how do we actually intervene in those steps? That's what clearing crimes is about. That's what actually addressing long-term violent crime issues does for us. And that's the sort of work that we're proud of. And then Brother Dogood's introduction mentioned this very important area, which is the challenges that we have in Kansas City today. That's point 4, reform. We can't just have a program that says, hey, everybody, trust the police, effective tomorrow. Or, hey, everybody, follow us or listen to us. What we need to do is say, how can we do better? Where can we step up our game? That's why you've seen things like the decriminalization of marijuana offenses, at least as an ordinance violation here in Kansas City, or something I'm immensely proud of, the decriminalization of parking tickets. Some people don't think it matters, but the number of Black men and Black women who have come up to me over my years, not just as mayor, but on the city council, who said, Mayor Q or Councilman Q, I got tripped up because I had this little problem before. I had this charge or this arrest. I couldn't fix it. Can you help me find a different way? The easiest way for us to do it is to actually treat people fairly from the jump. In Kansas City Municipal Court, every year we have thousands of people that will find diversions. I'm one of them, many of you may be. We fix a speeding ticket. But a lot of people who don't. They're the people who pay a fine. And if they can't afford a fine, they don't pay it. They get a warrant for their arrest. They get stopped, pulled away from their families. They become investigated for other crimes. We need to make sure that we're streamlining a process where people will have similar punishment for similar offenses. We need to streamline a path where we're saying justice is equal for everyone. And that to me is what reform is all about. It's saying that if you have a complaint against the Kansas City Police Department, you don't have to go to a notary public, something a lot of people won't know. It's saying you won't have to actually file that complaint within 90 days, or they can bring a criminal action against you for up to 5 years, or if it's a serious enough offense, for the rest of your life. And it's saying that we're going to make sure that there is true accountability between the Kansas City, Missouri Police Department and the citizens of our city. It's those steps that we've needed leading social health and leading to our violent crime epidemic that can make a difference for our community long term. I've said it in a few different speeches, and I believe it every step of the way. I don't want us to wake up 25 years from now shaking our head and saying, well, you know, this is the one problem Kansas City can't beat. This is the one tragedy we can't get beyond. I ran some math the other day. During my lifetime, more than 4,000 Kansas Cityans have died due to gun violence. That is wholly unacceptable for us. The generations that we've lost, the families that weren't started, the producers that we didn't get to see. We have to resolve ourselves to say we will take every step, every avenue possible to make as much difference as we possibly can. That's why I'm in this struggle each day, even though at times it has not been easy. It is often work, but it's work that I find so valuable because I've never forgotten that important saying that I learned from a young man's age. There, but for the grace of God, go I. As a Black man in our community, as a younger Black man than some, I believe that it's my duty to make sure that I'm building a pathway for another generation. And that pathway can't just be going to Jefferson City lobby and losing and then saying, well, we tried. It has to be saying that we will truly make a concrete difference in every way that we can. With that, I want to say thank you so much for making time to listen. I'm happy to stand for any questions. And I have so much love and appreciation for the cause that you espouse each and every year that you get together. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor. There is one question that comes to mind from your talking with us today, and that's, are there best practices that you've seen in other cities that we can incorporate in Kansas City, or is the current plan, the 4 points that you mentioned, is that totally new, or is this, and what are your hopes of it working?
So in terms of best practices, there are some. We have adopted some plans from Milwaukee, was one, that has been using what is called and was created by the Department of Justice, although the friendly side of it, the Public Safety Partnership. Under the Public Safety Partnership, you're doing a lot more to learn about each crime at issue and each incident. What you're not doing is simply seeing things in large raw numbers, but instead you are humanizing victims. You're humanizing assailants, you're humanizing the cycle of crime that we see in our community. I think what we've often found a problem with is that we too often say that, well, this is an issue it's in an area, it's unstoppable, there's not a lot that we can do. And you actually spend time in saying, what was Quentin's story? Where did society fail him? Where did he go awry? And you actually try to work that up, and you talk to people who are in his community under the Milwaukee model, then that's the sort of thing that you can get people who are all recognizing, wow, this is a problem, I can see a way out, right? That's the sort of group type of investment that we need to make. I went to a funeral of cousin mine probably ago, just about the day. And I talked to, he'd gone to Paseo High School, and I talked to other students who had gone to school with him, a bunch of 17 and 18-year-olds. And some of them were saying, this is my third funeral this year. To which I said, my God, what are we doing wrong? How are we handling something like this? Right? Making sure we reach those, just walking away from those groups of young men is something that I think is key. And we've seen places like Milwaukee, Oakland, even Tampa, Florida have a step and approach where they're actually doing that.
How have you, or have you had any luck in breaking the logjam in Jefferson City on addressing just guns in general, and how to reduce the number of guns and get permits back in force so that people have to at least qualify if they have a handgun?
So in terms of the log jam in Jefferson City, I would love to boast that I have, and we have not on some of the most important and intractable issues about which we care. When you're talking about gun violence, when you talk about having people recognize the epidemic in our cities, I don't think that we've moved the needle enough. You saw this year Governor Parson convened a special session to address violent crime. And what were the proposals? The proposals included an unfunded witness protection program. And they included charging minors as young as 12 years old as adults in violent crime incidents. It included changing the rules of hearsay in criminal cases. These, so you can get convictions more easily. These aren't the type of things that actually change crime long term. These don't build trust in communities. These don't build more witnesses for the Kansas City Police Department. Instead, they harken back to times long gone. They harken back to plans that have not worked. And they're the sorts of things that need to be changed. So we'll continue to fight in Jefferson City, but frankly, I'm trying to fight wherever else we can. I'm trying to do it every day at City Hall, all that we can do. Working with other regional leaders here in the Kansas City area, including Kansas City, Kansas, Independence, Johnson County, to make sure that we're actually addressing the issues that are vital to us and not just waiting for the good mood of our friends in Jefferson City.
Gotcha. A question that's come into chat says, would you support defunding the police? And if so, what would that look like? Defunding the heavily militarization of the police is something that this individual who asked the question supports.
I always say it this way, as defunding is often described, reallocation, actually true investment in building from the ground up social services, I'm there. What I don't support is a pure, almost unplanned reduction of budgets, not based on where we're going to send the money somewhere else. What we can't simply do is get an annual fight about how big the police budget is. What we have to do is actually say, what are the alternatives that we're trying to build? Are we actually trying to make sure that we're establishing more social workers in every precinct in our city? That's helpful. Are we trying to make sure that we are launching more social programs, after school programs, more work for our young people? That's healthy. Those are the sorts of things I want to build. If we're fighting in the language of those that don't want to work with us, if we're always fighting in the language of policing is central to every solution, then we're going to be on the wrong path, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to continue to see them as the solution. And it's funny because it's counterintuitive. I've talked to so many activists over the last several months, and they're always saying, we want to abolish the police. We want to do this or that. I'm like, hey, I get why you talk about the police, but how do we build our community? What are we doing to actually address the long-term solutions that we need at the core of our neighborhoods? If our view is that we want to build up healthcare opportunities so that people know they have a place to go, let's talk about how we build that. Not play in the narrative of, all right, well, we're assuming arguendo that they're the solution. And that's where I see, in some ways, the narrative needing to change. We're post an election now, or so it seems. So I hope we get there sometime soon.
Another question that's come into chat, piggybacking on what exists in the police culture. How do you create a culture in which there's not hostility between the police and the African-American community?
I think I've had a few different views. One, you find a way for fewer people to be messed with every day. Seems kind of crazy, but if you're stopping, I'll just say it this way. I went to college, as you all know, right? Went to law school. The darndest thing happened when I went there. I saw all these people, white people, that were smoking marijuana. I saw all these people that are committing petty offenses. And there was not a police officer to be seen. None of them were having brought to them all of the long-term record-making types of harms that a young black man or a young black woman walking the streets of our city or the city of St. Louis, where I went to school, might have been running into. Why is that? It's because we've decided to build up almost a dragnet in certain communities of our city, while in others we have not. To me, I think the way you cure that is actually making sure our laws are fairly applied and our laws are fair. We are not being fair right now if a kid who's sitting on a college campus, an expensive school, all of that, doesn't run into any type of problem because of their recreational drug use. Whereas someone else is finding themselves in jail time, finding themselves in a position that they can't buy their way out of. So I've tried to reduce the number of penalties that exist. We're increasing the training that our police officers get in terms of de-escalation. We're spending more time actually on how do we actually ensure that if there is a complaint, there are cures happening long-term. That's what you start to do. But I will also admit this, and I'm not necessarily changing the world. There will, for as long as I've been alive, there has been, and I fear there always will be, some hostility to African Americans. We live in Jackson County, where the other day they voted to keep the Andrew Jackson statue by a tremendously large number. We need to continue to push society to understand what things look like for people, how people feel, how communities respond, how a black boy or black girl, including somebody even like me, can grow up and still have concerns, still be nervous when they're across from a police officer who may well be there to help them. Those are the sorts of things that we need to make sure everybody understands. And those are the fixes that long-term we need to try to address. How do we get the officers back to wearing blue shirts on the outside rather than tactical gear that tells you that somebody's going to war? Right? It's simple things like that along the way that help lower the temperature and help limit the hostility.
Last question, Mayor, and we really appreciate your time. You mentioned prevention, intervention, clearance, and reform. When do you think people in Kansas City can actually see the result of this kind of work in reducing violence and reducing the deaths, et cetera?
You know, that's the hardest part of it all. I'll be honest, prevention, and actually I'll be honest on the hardest, this is why people don't actually often go to this. Prevention, we'll see the results a decade from now. We'll see the results 15 years from now. We'll see the results and the opportunities that we have for young black boys, black girls, all types of boys and girls that live in the core of our city. That's what prevention is, but it's so vitally important. We invest sometimes in America in public education. We invest in things that can make our community better long-term. We invest in roads and bridges because we long-term want to allow people and commerce to get to places. We need to see that same type of effort and focus and solution and what prevention can mean. On clearance, yes, that's something that we can probably see a metric in year after year. And intervention, we can probably see a more short-term arrangement. But I'll tell you this, everybody, if we don't invest and think about prevention, if we don't think about how we build our community and avoid our long-term problems, we'll be back in this conversation 20 years from now. And I know on behalf of the many people that we want to see grow up and have good lives, I don't want to be back there.
Mayor, thank you so much. You were excellent, as I knew you would be, and certainly we appreciate your time.
Thank you also very much. I enjoyed being with you and look forward to visiting with you again next year. Take care now.